There we go. I'll make sure we start recording. The second question I get asked, like I said, is, or I always get asked, is will the slides be available? And there will be a link to the slides, which will be available at the end. Delighted to be able to welcome Carolyn Middleton and Robin Beck to our session today. Really interested in what you're covering, guys. We've got 50 people in the room, all waiting to understand ROI. So please do keep chatting. Please do keep asking your questions. But Carolyn, I'm going to hand over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everybody else. Let me introduce myself. I'm Carolyn Middleton, and my role in my organisation, which is NHS Property Services, is Learning and Development Specialist, and one of those specialisms is looking at ROI. So I've been invited today by the team at Think Learning to share with you how the partnership we have supports ROI challenges head on, which is exciting because I'm normally sitting in the audience as opposed to presenting. Each year it does seem as though technology has moved on massively, and you only need to look at all of the talks with the word AI in them to know that we're at the beginning of a major change in our industry. Since the pandemic, dare I say it, which was 5 years ago, can't believe that, L&D teams have had to be more flexible than ever to align with the new way of hybrid working. And I say hybrid because it just seems a way of life now as opposed to, anything else. So even with all of that new technology and AI on the horizon, it is important to remember that learning and development teams are here to do, which is to provide value to the business that they service, and also sometimes that means we have to get back to basics as well. So let me just tell you a little bit about NHS Property Services. We are an organisation that, I work for Property Services. To give some context, the business, what the role that we play in the wider NHS as well, is we're approximately 5,500 colleagues, and our core business is facilities and property management for more than 3,000 primary care buildings across England, which actually equates to around 12% of the whole NHS estate. It also means that we have patient-facing colleagues such as domestic cleaners, catering receptionists, assistants, maintenance operatives, engineers, security guards, porters, and many more, and also our corporate colleagues who sit within IT, HR, finance, and other supporting functions. NHS Property Services is quite unique as well in the fact that we are a limited company owned by the Department of Health, which means that we operate as a commercial company, but are still part of the NHS family and public sector. And any money that we do generate from the services we provide to our customers and to our tenants does go back into the NHS, which is where it is very much needed. And this actually makes us a sustainable and flexible business model with the aim of enabling excellent patient care. And also what it does is it provides value to the taxpayer. It makes a current economic uncertainty. That means, again, that many businesses, they're looking to make those savings. And one of those areas, unfortunately, is learning and development. Budgets are often cut or, they become a target as well. And that means that L&D teams in both private and public sector need to be able to provide evidence of the value that they are adding and justify the time and effort and the money that is being spent in their business. So I'm going to start with a question. How confident are you of providing evidence for the impact of learning in your business? I think Andrew set a poll up there as well. Yeah, perfect.
I have set a poll up, so I'm really keen, everybody. There's 4 answers to this one. So your confidence, are you completely confident of providing evidence, mostly confident, partly confident, or not at all? And you'll see I've opened up another box there as well. So if you want to, in that chat box, just put in some justification. I'm really interested. So we've goodness me, we've had 40 or nearly 40 people already respond. I'm interested. What are your thoughts, Carolyn? Is that what you thought? 84% of people are partly. Is that a surprise to you?
It is interesting that it is 80, gone up to 85% there.
Hmm.
What I can see is that we're 0% for completely confident. So this is a great space for us to be able to try and provide a bit of guidance, a bit of support to say that you're not alone in that. It is great that we have some evidence. People are starting to look at that, and hopefully from the end of today we'll be able to have some takeaways and go, right, okay, I'm partly, let me try and move into mostly, and then that will help those mostly to move into completely in terms of that space. So yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, definitely.
I think it's interesting. We've got one person who's got no confidence at all,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
which
let's
is a bit
change
sad.
that
And
perception.
absolutely, I love Marina's comment as well. Tend to focus on learning outcomes, not business
Yes.
outcomes, and it's the big challenge in learning and development, which I think is absolutely spot on. I think you're 100% correct, Marina. I have a big issue around learning outcomes because I don't think they're outcomes. I think they're outputs, and it's in terms of what that looks like in terms of business outcomes. We do struggle. Really interested to see how your view might change as we go through this today. Not surprised by the response. I'm going to close the poll now. So poll is ended, and yeah, we got 2 people said not at all. So maybe we can shift them today, perhaps.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. Thank you for that.
Right.
Great. It's good to understand that other people are, in a similar position. So let's have a look at some findings and a bit of research. So according to the 2023 CIPD Learning at Work survey, only 50% of respondents agreed that they had a process in place for assessing learning impact. Struggling to show ROI was also the 5th highest responses relating to challenges with it L&D teams are facing. So here at NHSPS, and I'm sure this is the same for lots of organisations, obviously the comments that we've seen as well, we've always had a pretty good measure of reaction to learning. Most people will be familiar with feedback forms, smile sheets that learners will complete at the end of the session. So if they were completed on paper, again, this is the pain. You've got that time of having to collate the data, analyze that data, such painstaking time. And with new technology, this tends to be fairly easy to gather. But all it tells us is with the training that they've attended, it doesn't show us the real value or that return on investment. So this leads to my next question of why do you think L&D teams struggle to show that impact of learning?
There was I chatting away, and I realised, Andrew, you're on mute. So I've opened up a box here. I've opened up a box. What are your challenges? You can put your challenges in this box. You can tell us if you don't have any challenges. Tell us why you think people have got challenges over this. Why do you struggle to look at the impact of learning in the workplace? I'm really interested in what your challenges are, or why you think there are challenges. Let's put your comments in that large box for me, and I'll just let you know I've just pasted the link into the Learning at Work survey from the CIPD in the chat box. So let's have a look. So Marina, thank you responding. Confidence with data analytics is being highlighted. Carolyn, Robin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no,
I
that's
think,
really interesting. Oh, sorry, Carolyn.
no, go
Yeah, I'll
ahead.
just say, yeah, yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think that that's something that certainly I would hope that as an LMS supplier that we should be able to help with in terms of providing the tools to gather those analytics, and those are some of the things that I'm going to be touching on later. And yeah, it's a challenge everywhere. How to gather that information in the first place, and then also interpret it and get it in a state where it's kind of able to be used and to evidence the sort of the outcomes that people are hoping to do. But yeah, I hope that we have some tools in place, and that's part of the work that we've done with NHS Property Services, which we'll touch on later.
I think as well to on the
Thank
back
you.
of that, a lot of these comments that are in there, hopefully we'll have some support and some answers to how we've managed that within NHSPS. And it's not all complete. It is definitely work that is ongoing, but we'll hopefully be able to help with that. So brilliant. Thank you for that.
What I think is interesting is that when you come back and look at the recording, everybody, is just have a look and see what other people have got issues with. It's always good to review these sessions and just have a look and see, okay, so what have people said? And I loved some of the comments. So Femke, and I also saw, who else was it? Karen. Was it Karen? Oh, I can't remember who it was. I saw somebody saying, well, actually, not knowing, disconnection to the organizational objectives, not knowing why we're doing it. Do we actually understand the where we're starting from, and all of that kind of stuff, which I think is such an interesting thing. Mandation, Claire said on the previous one, too much focusing on stats and mandatory training, and so on. And it's that we're focusing on doing training rather than focusing on the performance, which I think is the interesting part of it. But thank you everybody for your comments. Really interesting to see what issues you've got. Awesome stuff.
Well, thank you.
Back to you again, Carolyn.
So again, to answer some of those things, I think you guys have added quite a lot in there. But yes, we've got the increasing workload and time that it takes to look at what we've got, look at what you want, and also to try and evaluate that information as well. And I did see a comment where somebody said they focus on just the delivery rather than anything else. So it's the focus on those priorities is very, very evident as well. And having the capacity, if you're a small team, can you afford to spend that time? You've got a bit of a push and pull in where your priorities are. And do you have anybody with expertise and capability in your team that's able to do this for you? Access to quality data, I did see that in the chat as well, having that data. So we'll talk a little bit more about how you can access that quality data. And poor or limited technology, including access to systems. So again, we'll touch on that, and Robin will also touch on that a little bit later. So yeah, teams can't afford not to be measuring the impact of learning. I think that's what we need to establish. So what are the benefits? So we know why L&D teams don't measure the impact of learning, but what are the benefits of this, and why should we even bother? So when you think about your justification for your L&D budget, it strengthens the case for that continued investment. And also, it builds trusts and gets buy-in from senior stakeholders. Also saw a comment around the senior stakeholders, how do you get their buy-in? And then we've got helps us to make informed data-driven decisions. What data do we want? Why are we capturing that information? What is that actually going to tell us? And reducing the wastage. Do you need to put that course on? Do you need to deliver that? Has it had its time? Not every solution is going to be a success. And again, it needs to lead to continuous improvement. So we need to be able to see that. So what about getting started? How do we start? So, at NHSPS, what we did was we started small. So if any of the L&D professionals are struggling and don't know where to start measuring the impact of learning, I would definitely say what has worked for us at NHSPS is to start a little bit smaller. So you might see everything holistically and go, right, what is it I need to do? Let's go through that. Have a go with 1 or 2 programs, and once you're comfortable and you can start to make that a little bit more of common practice. Don't run before you can walk. Don't look at everything, because it just becomes too huge, and you just want to narrow that down a little bit. So whatever you choose to measure, here are some of the things to look out for, and will help you to get started. So learning needs to be linked to your business objectives and your goals. So all the learning should be in some way aligned to the business needs. So we have ours aligned to our business needs. We have it within our objectives, our corporate objectives as well. But when it comes to the impact and ROI, measure learning isn't closely aligned to it needs to be closely aligned to our overall business objects, and it will be interesting and insightful to our senior leaders as well. So thinking about those big costs as well, have a look at last year's financials and think about, where did you spend most of your L&D budget? What are you planning to spend most of your L&D budget on this year? And there's also those larger audience, those programs where you've got your leadership and development programs, you'll have safety and compliance, examples again are onboarding and induction. They're the bigger elements of those larger audiences. And again, there is lots of learning hours. So if we're taking people away from their roles, from their jobs, it needs to be valuable. How many times have you on this call walked away from a full day course and left without any idea of how you're going to use what it is that you've learnt? There is, within L&D, you require lots of resource. So learning and development, it's a time is precious and we need to spend it wisely. So you're not focusing on putting all of your resource into this. You've got to manage that in the right way. And I'm sure you guys can think of many, many more things around that as well. So this is what we've got in terms of
Before you go on, Carolyn.
Certainly.
Sorry, Carolyn. Before you go on, we've had a question from Marina, which I think we want to answer before we go further, which is how do you an example of how you linking training goals to business goals? So, have you got a specific example that you can quote where you actually link the learning activity to the business activity? Sorry to cut you off in your prime, but
no, that's fine. So yeah, definitely. So what we have had within our objectives in terms of upskilling our leaders. So we'll have a leadership program, and within that leadership program, within our objectives, our corporate objectives, it would be 95% of attendance, 95% of achieved all of the modules that we've set aside for that leadership program. And that then has to, we need to make sure that everybody's signed up, everybody is attending that, and that they've all walked away and studied every element of those modules that we've set out. So that is an example, and we need to achieve that 95%, and which we have done. So I hope that answers that question for you, Marina. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so let's just have a look at it. One of the most popular and well-renowned models for measuring the effectiveness of learning is the Kirkpatrick model, which you can see there. And it has 4 levels of evaluation. You've got your reaction, your learning, your results, and your behavior and your results as well. So we find that this is a robust way of looking at learning and the effectiveness. And as we move through each of those levels, the more time and effort that's required. However, it also proves that it adds much more value, especially when we get to level 4, which looks at how the learning impacts our overall business goals as well. So that also might add to the question previously. So level 1, let's have a look at the reaction. So in level 1, with many, it has many sort of limitations of level 1. So we do this for all of our learning within NHSPS. So one of the things is we will have star ratings. So we'll have those applied on all courses, and it's really a quick and easy way of measuring what people thought of our learning. Although it doesn't really give us a huge amount of detail, but what it will say is whether it was good or whether it was bad. And what we think is that if that's good enough for corporate companies such as Amazon and also Google, then we feel that that's something that's good enough for us here at NHSPS. And also we have feedback forms. So you can see there in our feedback forms, we'll have a webinar, then we'll have some feedback, but also we'll have certification applied as well. And what we do is we will open up the webinar, we will lock down the completion of that until we have some feedback, and then we'll lock down that certification until we've had that feedback. So, and we found that there was an issue with learners where they weren't completing that feedback. And what we don't want is it for it to become a bit of a ticky box exercise for anything. So that's why we've incentivized that completion of that feedback, and we make it mandatory as part of the course. It does mean that the course will remain incomplete until that feedback has been submitted. But, as I've said, we can also lock down the certification as well, and that means that they wouldn't get that certificate. And actually our colleagues, once we've started to have access to certificates, they really like that. It helps with their learning plans, it helps with their overall objectives, their goals that they set out at each year. So it really does help them with their own personal development. And then we also have QR codes, which you're all very familiar of. But the way that we have these QR codes is that we'll especially use them in face-to-face sessions. We'll attach them to doors. It makes it easier when people are coming in and going out, oh yeah, there's a reminder, let me do my feedback. And we've also added in our logo as well to make that a little bit more appealing, customized it, which is a lot better. And then there's our engagement survey, so our company engagement survey. So we use all of our engagement survey to measure the overall reaction to learning. Although, again, it is very high level and it doesn't provide much detail. We can compare year on year to see how colleagues react to learning and development within the business. So for level 1, for reaction, how satisfied were learners with things like the quality of the training, the amount of engagement, the course material, clarity of learning, outcomes, etc. This is the most common level that L&D teams use when they're measuring the learning. So what are the pros around this? So the data is typically quite easily to gather. You can quantify it, and learners are asked straight after the course to complete a quick feedback form, a smile sheet. If it's done properly, then that can be useful to gauge the feelings of learners, identify who has completed that learning. Now, the consequences, there's always consequences. So a lot of the time, learners, they'll complete that in a rush, which means that it's no more than that ticky box exercise. You're not going to get a little bit any more from that. It doesn't prove whether any learning has been transferred to the learner, and it doesn't provide any insight into whether the learner has had any real impact from the business. And it's a more complex way of gathering how well learning is being received is to observe it taking place, although again that is very time consuming as well. And it's manual, it's laborious, and you haven't got the time or the resources to be able to do that as equally as it is subjective and can be difficult to measure. And I noticed somebody had asked about things like this can be difficult to measure as well. So let's look at level 2 in terms of the learning. So what is it that we've done? So another simple way of checking learning is by asking learners to complete assessments. And these can come in very different forms. So the most simple and quickest way is for the form to have multiple choice quizzes. There's automated and it doesn't require any marking by a tutor. And if appropriate, we can ask learners as well to complete written assignments about whether or not, what it is that they've learnt. And also these can then be submitted in the file format or as a text box. And we can add due dates, word limits, and edit other settings, and also to suit our preferences of what it is that we want and the data that we want to have returned as well. We can use the events function and add scheduled conversations with learners to discuss their learning, catch up, check-in times. You can do all of that. And this checks in that the learner has understood and explained what it is that they have learnt, which is great actually, and it's good for the learner as well as the managers. We can also create those tailored checklists, and that aligns with learning outcomes that trainers can mark for each learner after conversations have taken place. So this is, again, time-consuming process, but it is really valuable, and trainers need to be really skilled to ask the right questions to gauge that understanding. And we wouldn't use this method for all learning due to the resources that it requires, but it is a great way of measuring how much of the learning that has been transferred from the sessions into the learner. And again, we can restrict access to assessments, assignments, even events and checklists until the learners have completed activities. So looking at our level 2, it focuses on what's been learned. And at this level, we can ask learners how will they use what it is that they've learned and what will they do differently from previous to now after they've got the learning. And looking at the intended learning outcomes of the interventions, we can measure the learner's knowledge, understanding, skills and attitudes before and again after the training. And this can be captured through methods such as assessments, knowledge checks, and also intervals as well, interviews. So let's move on to level 3 in terms of our behaviour. So we've done quite a lot here at NHSPS in terms of behaviour. It's very behaviour. We've got focused in different different areas of what we do. So when that learning has been transferred and we can then assess the behavioral changes, it checks the practical application of learning, and there are lots of ways that we can do this. So we can create process that observes practical on-the-job tasks, such as cleaning in terms of our domestic colleagues. And when the learners are deemed to be demonstrating the right behaviours, we can record this in our LMS for each of those learners. We also have linked in the learning outcomes and behaviours that we want to see from core skills into our performance, so our programmes from our core skills, management workflow that we have as well. And we can also have ratings in so people in their teams for each area. So from that, we can measure how effectively our programs have been producing, how they've been successful by producing sort of reports and comparing the ratings 6 monthly intervals, and also up to a year in terms of our performance measurement, and whether or not there's been any wholesale improvement. And as we mentioned, one downside to this is that different managers will have different perspectives. So we also need to make sure and ensure that managers understand how to rate performance consistently across the business. And this is something that's tested at level 2 when we talked about that a little bit earlier. So looking at level 3 and those behaviours, it looks at the application of what has been learned. So what are people doing differently in the workplace? For example, if the intervention is focused on improving communication, have they had that opportunity to put that into practice? Or have they been able to teach what it is that they've learned to others and their peers? When we're measuring the changes in behaviour, this will happen over weeks, months, even years sometimes. And managers need to encourage and reward positive change in behaviour through regular conversations, giving feedback. This is what we do in NHS Property Services. We do, it's very much feedback driven, and it's all around conversations and how we talk to one another and get that understanding of how that all works. And if it happens, new habits will be made, and you'll be able to see that, and the learning then can be embedded. And in some instances, where we don't want our people to use what they've learned. So, for example, within the NHS, if there is an emergency, we have to respond to emergencies, that behaviour might be slightly different only for those particular examples. So we will need to be clever about how we measure that change in the behaviour as well. So let's have a look at what the pros are. Providing learning interventions are aligned with business needs, so the practical application of what has been learned should lead to positive, tangible benefits for the business. So that's again measured in level 4, and we'll look at that. So, for example, if learners have developed their customer service skills, then you would expect to see greater customer satisfaction scores, which actually we have seen in NHSPS. They've gone up quite a lot, and that is quite a focus for us as well. It's a good opportunity for learning to be shared with peers, also reinforces that learning, and measuring behaviours encourages learner engagement and application. Leads to learning in the flow of work, so on the job, which has its own benefits as it can save time, money, increase of job satisfaction, and better motivation. So before we look at level 4, are there any questions before I move into level 4?
We've had a couple of questions around the topic generally, or specifically to do with is it available in certain systems and so on. We had someone saying that they didn't think your example was a particularly good one, but somebody else has jumped in and given another example, which is really handy. Question from Jason. He says about mentioning satisfaction, but satisfaction itself isn't a measure of competency. Do you have any issues of if people are satisfied, does that suggest that they will be better at it? Have you got any data supporting that at all?
So Yeah, so as an example of customer satisfaction, so our engineers, they'll take their job, they will go and do that job, and then what we'll get is the customer who has raised that job will get a questionnaire, and that is where we get that customer feedback that comes back, whether or not we've done a great job, we haven't done a great job. So that is actually leveled up. So we have got some a huge amount of data that tells us that.
Okay, so we've got satisfaction of the person completing it and satisfaction of the customer as well. Fabulous. Thanks, Carolyn.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to level 4. So this looks at the real outcome focused results. So this is where the true benefit of learning is realized, and the final results should be closely linked to learning interventions. And what that does, that makes it more important to the success of the business. So this stage can be measured. So although in newer versions of the model, the 5th stage has been created specifically to measure ROI. And examples here include our increased employee retention, increased productivity, increased sales, cost savings, increased employee engagement, and lots more. Our engagement survey has increased as well over the last couple of years. We action the comments that come through, the things that our colleagues are not satisfied with, we'll take those on board and we'll go and do everything that we can. And when that comes back, that satisfaction score has increased as well. So we know that some of the things that we are doing is in the right direction. It does take some thought about which metrics that you need to be able to measure that impact. So we need to really ensure that the data that needs to exist in the system and how we can gather it as well. So it's a big obstacle for L&D teams, and part of the reason is why some people don't bother. If you can't get it, it's hard. But if we get this right, it can be really rewarding and provide for some tremendous value. So our performance management workflow in our LMS is also something that shows our metrics and also our overall ratings for our colleagues. So that's both mid-year and at end of year as well. And these are metrics that we compare. And we do compare as well. And it's intended to increase team performance, such as in our leadership action development program, and we can see which managers attended and which ones didn't, and we can actually compare those results as well of which managers are performing better, have they attended, which managers have not attended, and are they not performing in the right direction as well. So we also have lots of data that we use to directly measure the success and impact of the programs. So lots of that is coming from outside of our LMS. For example, some of our internal transitional programs, such as Stepping Stones, Aspiring Managers, and also Driving Our Own Career. And they're directly linked to promotions and into new roles. So we can see colleagues who've attended any of those programs, and we can actually track their promotions as well. And we do that with our talent team in turn. We've access to the data, so the comparisons between the programs can be made. And not only do our Aspiring Manager program have a great reaction from learners, it's also, we can see the evidence of that being embedded in their behaviours, and it also has the metrics to show this is one of the most valuable programs that we deliver, and it measures at all 4 of the levels, and it makes it a strong case for continuing to deliver these programs to our learners. Other examples at which managers have attended Creating Healthy Teams programs, and it's measuring against team sickness rates, for example. So as you can see, we have also looked at turnover, which is a good indicator to see whether our management programs are having the desired result. So we can see who's attended, whether or not their absence levels have changed. Are they managing that a lot better than they were? And we can actually do a compare and contrast against colleagues that have not actually entered that program as well. And what we can also do is, when we're talking about that compare and contrast, that correlation, it doesn't necessarily equal causation either. But if we can back this up with other data, it does become a bit of a stronger case for us. And finally, ROI is something that, you know, L&D teams are not always doing consistently. That question was asked at the beginning, and NHSPS are just, you know, getting into the swing of it. And also there are some programs with big expenses that we're starting to measure. And some examples of this are sort of technical compliance programs for our delivery colleagues. And we expect to be able to demonstrate some returns on that later in the year, our financial year. The pros of this, lots of these, you know, at this level, we can provide a lot of really good quality data upon that further investment. So it's what senior leaders really want to see. They want to see the metrics. They want to understand what that looks like in their functions, what that looks like right in the managers, right track down to individuals as well. So if L&D interventions aren't adding any value, then informed decisions can be made to stop delivering them and invest the budget elsewhere. So what are the cons? Very time consuming, you know, the data required can be difficult to gather. Correlation doesn't always mean causation, as I've said. For example, if we're looking at whether productivity of a team has increased to measure the success of a leadership development program, we need to be mindful that other factors could contribute towards this, such as new technology, systems, and processes as well. And therefore, the more metrics that we can gather to provide the evidence of the impact, then the better. So, those were just some examples of how we've used LMS and other systems to measure the impact of learning. And I hope this has inspired you to have a little think about how you can go away and think about measuring learning in your own organizations. Would you like to share what steps it is that you've taken in your own organization to measure ROI and the impact of learning? And it'd be interesting to see from this, the poll that we did, where we've got people that have got none, but then actually just partially. So it'll be interesting to see. And also anybody that said mostly, what it is. Thank you.
Awesome stuff. So we have the question, what steps have you taken in your organisation to look at impact, return on investment of the learning activity that you've underdone, or that you've undertaken? Sorry, you've underdone. That you've done or undertaken. Please, let's put your comments. I can see a few people are typing. Let us know in that chat box underneath the slide there. I can see Peter's typing as well. I can think of dozens of things that I've done elsewhere, but I'm really keen to see what the audience here have done. So Claire says, we've looked at our investment in apprenticeships, looked at retention and progression post-apprenticeship. That's a really useful way of doing it, Claire. Yeah, excellent. Sonia talks about focus of learning for customers, working about cross-referencing data of new customers, onboarding with training completions. It's a really good way to do that, Sonia. There's new customers, existing customers, is always one way of looking at it, and looking at customer satisfaction, customer expectation as well can be really interesting way. So has there been a shift in expectations? Do customers expect more as a result of that? Is always really interesting. Marina, leadership development, mobility and retention, fabulous. It's a really important one. I think every organisation's probably got programs for women, programs for people from BAME backgrounds. We've got programs for people with disabilities, but do we actually measure whether those things make any difference or not, which I think are really interesting. Well, what are your thoughts on what we've got here, Carolyn?
I think it's, the apprenticeships, we have a large apprenticeship program, so I will equally be taking some of this, what it is that you're doing, we'll take that back as well. So yeah, I think that these are great things. I really, there's a comment there that Karen's put, measuring speed to competency in new starters, I think is great, because then you can see whether or not your induction program is working, and whether or not that your managers are working with your new starters. And again, that is retention. How many people are we losing in that early part of their career? So what it is that you can do to help them, to embed them, give them a great induction, and then you've got them for a lot longer, which I think is great. Brilliant. Thank you.
That's a really important point that Phil's picked up as well, which again is looking at
yes.
Where's it gone? So Femke, sorry, it was Femke, I apologise, not Phil, it was Femke, looking at how long it took to be silo operational, which is exactly the same, which again, really important. And the other one, which I think is really important, which we have to stress here, is that you have to look at this stuff for all of the training you do. You can't just do it for your leadership stuff. And that's part of the big problem. What we do is we tend to focus just on the big things because they're the big ticket items. But actually, your onboarding can be more expensive to the organization. So actually, you need to make sure that it works. So it's fabulous that people are doing it for that, which I think is really interesting.
And as an example of that, what we've done is we've done a lot of our onboarding in terms of our introduction, maybe virtually, and we've started to do that more face to face. So gathering colleagues together and creating a bit of a network event as well, which is a good start to their career with us. So that works. Thank you.
Fabulous. I'll be closing the this box down now. Everybody, I can see there's a couple of people typing. But Jason has just said that my favourite thing that's been said so far is about outcomes. So outcomes are always better than outputs, and I cannot agree with you any harder than it's possible to say hard agree. Send it back to you. So it's back to you, Carolyn.
Lovely, thank you. I'm about to hand over to my colleagues. So I just want to show you, I know that there was mention a little bit earlier around how do you get hold of that data. So what we've done is we have created customized reports within our LMS platform, which is great for tracking mandatory and compliance training. But also what we've done is taken a step further by integrating our LMS data into Power BI dashboard, as you can see there. And that contains lots of metrics from lots of areas of our business. And the team at Think were an absolute great support and actually worked with our in-house developers to make this happen. So this gives managers and SMEs real-time reporting on all of the learning data. So what that does is it means we can measure against other metrics in the business. Procurement as an example, queries, customer CSAT scores that we've already talked about, and we can show that data at functional level, regional level, manager, right down to individual level as well. So thank you. I'm going to hand you over to Robin now.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Yeah, it's lovely to be here today. Thank you to everyone on the call for your time. So hello, I'm Robin. I'm here on behalf of Think Learning, and yeah, just really pleased to be able to present in partnership with NHS Property Services. I've been working in the learning technology sector. When I was thinking about this yesterday, for like 20 years, which is making me feel very, very old. Yeah, we're really proud of the partnerships, and it's a way that I feel throughout my career has been the model for success between supplier and client. Is really kind of invested. We're invested, sort of professionally and personally in making sure that we can meet their needs, and we have a really great relationship with NHS Property Services. Think has a large number of NHS clients. We work with over 50 NHS organisations, so we have a strong background in healthcare, but also public sector, commercial and education sector as well, as you can see from some of the logos on this slide. And as an organisation, we care about ROI. The reason for that is obviously Carolyn and NHS, but our clients care about it, and so therefore it's important that we care about it. But also on a kind of deeper level, commercially and also personally, it's important for us to play a part in evidencing and being able to provide the data that allows those sort of evaluations to be made to prove why continue to invest with us. So it's a challenge, we know that, but it's something that we are keen to work with clients on solutions to help them with that. And the things that Carolyn has talked about today, we're a part of that. We're not the total solution. We're providing a element of the data that's then pulled into a central database that can then be sort of compared with certain things. So I work for Think. We are a part of the Totara family. So we provide the Totara LMS. For those of you on the call that don't know, it's a highly customizable sort of LMS sold globally around through a partner network. And for me, the thing that makes working with the Totara LMS fun and what makes it work for our clients is around its flexibility, both as a product in itself, it's highly configurable. So you can build different user journeys, different interfaces yourselves. It's not kind of locked to specific ways of doing things. With that comes challenges about how best to utilize it, but we can also extend the code as well, and that's something that I think have really sort of been one of the key areas of success for us. And so, yeah, I'm going to be talking today a little bit about sort of what you can do with Totara, and broadly those things are probably comparable with many of the other systems, LMS systems that people are using out there. And then looking at some other things that we've done, which I think are interesting. And yeah, so let's move on to just a bit of a recap about what we've done with NHS Property Services. So this partnership started in 2021, and the first thing that we kind of started with, and it's kind of classic place to start, particularly in our kind of healthcare compliance driven clients, is around that kind of mandatory training, the stuff reflecting on the comments, the sort of the very basic level. Sometimes, this is where the focus has been, and it has in some places, that's where it stopped. But this forms the grounding of most of our applications, and it's something that we have, tried to make getting that kind of basic compliance data in the format that our organizations need as easy as possible. So things like the integration, Power BI integration that we looked at, building of specific kind of reporting blocks, and making that process sort of as easy as possible. But when we think about what an LMS can do, and the potential of an LMS, it's much more, I think, that this can be. And that's why it's interesting to be presenting today with NHS Property Services, who have utilized a number of our kind of extensions to the platform, and in particular around using our workflow tool. Workflow is basically a form builder that's highly configurable, enables a many number of different processes to be built. Carolyn mentioned some of these in her presentation, and each one of these is building up the data that we hold in the system. And depending on what data is being asked for, that can then be exported out, used as metrics for evidencing return on investment. Also, if you think of just broadly the return on investment for having an LMS platform, if you can extend a platform in a logical way, not trying to make one size fits all, that can be sometimes the temptation with extensions to a specific platform. But where it makes sense, and this I feel that all of these do, is bringing all of the learning interventions into a single place, using our workflow tool to manage that, so people can track their apprenticeship through there, as well as request professional development, as well as manage their own personal development plans. And I think one of them sort of, in terms of some of the reflecting on some of the comments and questions, is around sort of how is this training impacting on behaviors. And I think the performance management stuff that we've done with NHS Property Services is a really interesting example of that. So we have got all of the performance management process in the system. So those are tools that provide managers with the kind of basis of the conversations that they have in terms of goal setting, aligning those goals to the organizational goals, and then reviewing both goals and behaviors. So within the workflow form, a user is presented with the kind of corporate behaviors that then contextualize for their role. So you're able to compare scores for one, your executive, right down to someone at the ground level, someone that's just started, because the behaviors are the same, but they're contextualized for that role. So you're producing data that's then comparable. This is happening at mid-year, year-end, on a cyclic basis, and we're able to basically build whatever the process is into the system, and then pull out that kind of interesting data. And another thing that we kind of sort of touched upon is around how can we use an LMS to effectively measure impact. I want to quickly touch on something that I think I've done, which I think is really interesting, and potentially there might be similar things out there, but not something that I've come across before. So we've got this thing called Think Insight. It's a survey tool, which in itself is not that exciting. There are lots of good survey tools out there that you can use. Microsoft Forms, there are plenty out there. But the thing that makes this different for me is the ability to automate time delayed surveys. So automate one that's sent before a training session, automate one that's sent after a training session, or like 3 months after. And that means that you don't have to try and capture that feedback, capture the impact at the point of delivery. You're actually able to gather that information at a later stage. And as well as sending it to the actual individual, we can send this to other people, such as their manager. So 3 months after a training session has taken place, it may be that the survey then is sent to their manager and to say, what impact has this training intervention had? Has this resulted in the impact on the behavior that we hoped it would? And so that's again producing detailed reports that can be pulled out. Question: so the Power BI dashboard is not embedded in Totara. It's a separate. It's basically integrated, but not within the actual Totara platform itself. But all of this data can be exported, pulled into other systems that then enable that kind of data comparison. And other things are within the LMS and Totara in particular that I think are potentially useful around this ROI challenge. So I think that so Totara has a thing called Totara Engage, so social learning, and this is something that can again produce interesting metrics. So social learning, Totara Engage enables a broader set of users to be content curators. That then drives more usage of the platform, which increases the return on investment of having a platform. You can also pull off interesting metrics out of that, such as who are the people who are creating the most content, which of the content is the most engaged with, the most viewed. That content is quite simple. It's articles, videos. We use it internally in Think as a way of knowledge sharing, and so I think things like that can really increase the number of use cases, the number of touch points that an LMS can have, and that then broadens the kind of the return that you get from investing in a system like Totara. Reflecting as well on the sort of, yes, we can get training. So we can say that someone's attended a training, but what was the outcome of that? Things like competency management. So Totara has a thing called Totara Perform that has a competency framework within it. So what you can do is link that to training. So for example, you may have a certain behavior or skill linked to training, and so attending a training session could therefore mean that someone meets a certain value on that scale, but actually then using the manual rating element of someone observing that person. So attendance of course equals assumption of competence. Observation means a higher level of competence, and that can be assessed. So tools like this, being able to map actual learning to what is it that we want, the skills, the behaviors that we want to evidence. And it also, from an end user perspective, they're able to access their own competency profile and understand like how the learning connects to what they need to do for their role in order to be successful at it. So I think that can be really powerful. It's something that's it's a complex thing to integrate. It's a complex thing to build, building those kind of frameworks for every single role. But I think it can potentially be very, very powerful, and it could extend beyond a simple, has person come, yes or no. Another thing that we've added to the Totara platform is a thing that we call ThinkLink. This enables peer-to-peer interactions to happen within the system, connections, people to find other people. And again, it's another way of pulling people back into the system, recognizing that learning happens not just in the classroom on an e-learning course, but actually peer-to-peer, and it enables those relations to be recognized, and you can then report on that. So how many connections have we got? Have those connections reached? You'll be able to record progress towards a set outcome. Has that happened? How long did that take? And so this could be used to manage any number of different types of connections that you might have in an organization: mentor matching, coaching, potentially things like an element of the apprenticeship matching. So that's, again, it's another tool that we've added to the system that I think is potentially interesting in this space. And finally, I've come all the way back round to compliance, because that is, at the end of the day, our sort of the bread and butter, the kind of thing that underpins a lot of the of sort of what we need to do. And we've recently developed what we're calling a kind of crystal ball report that is able to use metrics on when a person is going to expire on some training versus when they're booked onto training in the future. And it's able to then forecast, have we got enough resource to deliver the training that we need in the future? So in terms of return on investment, it's ensuring that the investment is placed in the right places at the right time, so that organizations can maintain this level of compliance, which, as I say, is sort of the the bottom line for a lot of the clients that we have. It's the core of a lot of our solutions. And so that's another thing that I felt was just interesting. I wanted to point out. Yeah, that's me. Thank you very much for your time. Pass back to you, Carolyn.
I muted you, Karen. I'm not sure whether your microphone's unmuted. I'll unmute you. There you go. You should be okay now. Oh, I can't hear.
Oh,
Carolyn.
no, sorry.
Anybody else hear Carolyn?
If I get it back, maybe.
I'm not getting your audio through.
Maybe
Carolyn.
I could. Well, I mean, I'll talk to Carolyn's.
Audio doesn't seem to be
I think
doing
that this is something that's really interesting. We definitely don't have the solution yet in terms of thing, but it's something that we are looking at. And I think, and we talked about the challenges of getting the data to pull out meaningful conclusions, very time consuming in some cases. I think that AI is going to be a bit of a game changer in terms of being able to analyze large data sets and quickly produce sort of outcomes from that. So I think that's something that's really, really exciting. Something that we reflected on in the comments at the start, is about how challenging that can be to think solutions produce quite raw data in many instances. So it still requires an element of interpretation, and I think things like AI will undoubtedly mean that we can draw conclusions quicker and therefore focus away on boring data manipulation into how do we make our learning outcomes better. So I think it's a really exciting space.
It is. The shift in AI and understanding how we manage data is really important. Carolyn, I don't know whether your microphone's working. But the takeaways, this one's really important. Think about impact from the start is absolutely essential. If you don't know what you're going to measure, then why are you doing it, which I think is incredibly important. Begin measuring key programs. Like I said, it should be, find a key program to measure. I'm always a big fan.
So can you hear me now?
Carolyn, is your mic working?
Let me just wrap this up for you guys.
There we go.
We are a little bit over time, so yeah, thank you so much for that. This is live radio as such. So yeah, let's just have a look. Decide on the data sources at each of those levels that you want to do, and use the technology and resources available to you, like we've done. We've gone across the business. We've used the help of Think and Robin and the team, and that has enabled us to do everything. And finally, at the end of that, go away and celebrate your success. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's session. If anybody wants to get in touch, this is my email address. Happy to pick up on anything. I've also got my colleague John, who I was stepping in for today, and we'll be able to get in touch. But thank you so much, Andrew.
No problem. So a massive thank you and well done, Carolyn, for stepping in. Carolyn was incredibly nervous before when we went through this session the other day, and I think she did a cracking job. So please do let her know how well she did. Interesting comments. We're getting some great comments. We've got some questions which we're just not going to be able to spend time on, unfortunately, which is frustrating. But you've got Carolyn's details there. You've got her LinkedIn details. You've got Rob's details as well. You've got the Totara comment, how to measure, and also links to Totara and to Think Learning as well. And if people want the slides, Carolyn, they just ping you a message via that email. That's the easiest way to do it. Awesome. Fabulous. Thank you, everybody. We're back again at 12 o'clock UK time, where again we are, have we mentioned those horrible words, AI, because that seems to be what everybody wants to talk about at the moment. So we have a session where we're looking at AI and its use for putting global learning out through Mercedes-Benz. So we will be back at 12 o'clock. But see, there you go. Smashed it. Many thanks. Thanks so much. Really informative. Takeaways to get the basics right. So, good comments from everybody. So thank you. I'm going to put everybody else back into the lobby now. That will stop the recording.